It's amazing. But I said never again. Nothing happened, but it's just, ooh. So now you have it.
Okay, I got one. I gave my sister her middle name.
Oh, really?
I was an insistent 13-year-old. My father gave my sister name Jessica Dawn. I said, "There's no way in the world you're gonna give me 2 Arabic names and gonna stick her with this little Jessica Dawn, this little nice, perfect little name." And I said, "Look, you're don't give me one of these names. You're gonna give me the first one and gonna give me the middle one." I was like, I'm not leaving this room until you let me name her one of these names. And they said, "Fine, you can give her one of the middle names." I said, "All right, I'm picking an Arabic name for one of the names." And I looked up, and Aziza means precious in Arabic. And so she is Jessica Aziza Smith. And she lives here in the Atlanta area.
How old were you?
I was 13 years old.
Okay, that's adorable.
And very headstrong.
You said you were.
Well, I still am. I wasn't going to say nothing.
You got where you are because of that.
That's right. Yeah, well, you think I am. Just wait till you meet her.
Did everybody go?
I don't think.
No,
No,
just
I mean, I
three of
guess
us.
everyone's talking about. I'm just happy my puppy is finally house trained. That I can sleep through the
You
night.
can sleep through.
In there, bro.
What was
you
he
know.
doing when he wasn't house trained?
I can imagine.
We don't have dinner here, so
I try to
it
think of one that
required a
was
lot
like,
more discipline
Right.
and follow up.
A little bit of
The live
patience.
stream is going on the Facebook page. If you have a Facebook account, if you could go and share the live stream
Yeah.
from the King
Okay.
Center's page.
I'll turn my phone off.
Also, it's on our Twitter account and our Periscope, so if you could share it on all of your platforms before we get started, so
If
people can
someone
watch
wants to
the
grab my
live
phone
stream.
out of my purse, I'll do it.
Where's your purse?
It's up by that table in the other room. It's like the gold
yellow-
Kate
the gold
Spadish
purse?
purse. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
will do.
Feel free to dig around in there. I don't care.
All right. I'll share.
All right.
Do we need to continue talking?
Is it okay if I pray for the food? Okay. Are you all okay with that?
Yes.
I am a preacher by calling, even though I'm the CEO of the King Center. Okay, we're just gonna praise. Not gonna be long. God, we thank you for this day and this opportunity to fellowship and conversate. We thank you for your presence in our midst and for this food that we're about to receive. Just continue to bless the hands who prepared it, and may it nourish our bodies. In your name, I pray. Amen.
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 Thank you. Well.
Here's to those who give a damn, the ones who question the status quo and say we can do better. You don't wait to be invited to the table. You set your own table and bring people together. You believe great ideas can come from anyone, anywhere, no matter who you voted for, what you believe, the color of your skin, or who you love. Some might say you're a dreamer, but we think you're brave, because those who are brave enough to start a conversation that matters are the ones who co-create a better future for us all. It's time to come together.
Welcome to Beloved Community Talks. Let's Bridge. The Look, the Black male experience in America. This is a live stream event. The King Center, along with our partners at Procter & Gamble, will host this special thought-provoking dinner conversation as part of our signature programming. Our dinner guests include dinner host, Dr. Bernice A. King, CEO, The King Center. Dinner co-host, Sam Collier. Speaker and host, North Point Ministries, host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The Sam Collier Show. Dana Barrett, TV and radio host, The Dana Barrett Show on Talk Show Radio, 640 WGST. Pastor Daniel Hill, River City Community Church, author, Wide Awake. Damon Jones, Vice President of Global Communications, Procter & Gamble. Pastor Dawn McLaughlin, Senior Minister, North Atlanta Church of Christ. Sonny Patterson, spoken word poet and holistic healer. And Jamil Smith, Senior Writer, Rolling Stone. This program is sponsored by Procter & Gamble and our partner, Civic Dinners.
All rise.
For sponsoring this dinner tonight. We're going to have a courageous conversation around the short film that you all did that we just had a wonderful opportunity to look at. And I think the viewing audience, you had an opportunity to look at it as well. But thank you all for doing this. Thank you for pushing this issue to the forefront, because it is a conversation about biases against black men in America that we just don't talk about, and certainly don't talk about it enough. And so I'm glad you're here. We want to have courageous conversations. It's okay for us to disagree. Don't be afraid. Because, we haven't known each other very long, but hey, I feel like we're connected nonetheless as a part of the human family. But I just want to say, today is 56 years since my father delivered his iconic I Have a Dream speech. And there's a line in there that everybody talks about. Some people take it obviously out of context to mean that, he wants us to ignore race altogether, which is not what he meant. But that iconic phrase that refers to me and my siblings, the 4 children living in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And as I looked and viewed, as we viewed, the look, the one thing that I said to myself is 56 years since that speech, 51 years since his assassination. Why are we still dealing with bias against black people and black males in particular? What is it about black people, black men, that terrifies us? And so, this experience is real. I tell people, even as Dr. King's daughter, I've had those stares. I don't wear a sign that says, "Hey, I'm Dr. King's daughter." But I've been in stores where, people look at, one lady asked me what I did as if what I was purchasing I couldn't afford. Like, what are you doing? You must be doing something illegal. Because I'm black. Because again, I'm not, wearing anything to indicate this is who I am. And that's interesting because the gentleman was a judge, you know, he's walking around every day as a judge in this environment, but he's treated with suspicion and fear. And it's a real experience for black people and black men in particular in America. And so, Jamil, I just wanted to ask you, you know, you saw it, but it's a reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think too often the content of our character is judged by a look.
Yeah.
I think with one look, too often I think people are judging the content of a black man or black woman's character so quickly. They look at that boy or girl, they look at a little boy on a playground. You know, I know that playground that Tamir Rice was playing on. I'm from Cleveland. I've been to that gazebo where he was shot. 3 weeks after he was shot, the tire tracks from the police car were frozen into the mud. And, you know, the content of his character was judged by whoever called that 911. You know, it was judged by the 911 dispatcher, who then misinterpreted what was actually happening, what was reported to the police officer. It was judged in less than 2 seconds by the officer who shot him. And so it's not so much about color of skin, it's also about we're judging the content of all these people's characters just based upon how they look, what they quote unquote behave like. And that bias is going to be very, very difficult for us to get rid of if people don't get to work, and I mean everybody. It can't just be on us to convince people to love us, to not hate us.
No.
It has to be on them too.
Absolutely.
That's good. Pastor Don, what do you think?
So you all are free to eat.
Yeah, let's jump in.
This is dinner, and this food this is not
By all
fake
means.
food, you all.
Right.
This is
And we have said
real.
the blessing for everybody watching.
Okay?
Does everybody have salmon?
Salmon?
Is it salmon
Yeah.
for everybody? Okay, awesome.
Yes, salmon here.
Okay, awesome. All right, Pastor Don, what do you, as a white man, as a pastor?
Yes.
I don't know if you have kids. I think I heard that
I
you
got
had some.
5.
Right. Okay. What from that are you taking?
You know, I can reflect on what's been shared. When I watched the video for the 3rd or 4th time, what hit me was, had we ended the video that he got into his sanitation truck, had we ended the video that he got into a UPS delivery truck, then what's that? That it ended with a judge, then everyone is supposed to go like, oh, which only convicts us of the depth of the bias. That the twist at the end is that he's where he's not supposed to be, but oh my goodness, right? So it's like there's this mindset of exception that somehow he escaped, and apparently the people at this table escaped, but you all know that that's not kind of real. See, so I got 5 young adult children. I have 4 sons and a daughter. I got 4 children that are white. I got 1 son that's black.
Wow.
I can live and watch 3 boys get looked at one way, and I can watch another son get looked at another way, and it can be happening where all of us are walking together
Wow.
as it's happening. So that is part of how I would respond to watching the video and to the comments that were made.
But can I just interject this? You know, biases, these kind of biases are real. I mean, we all have them.
Absolutely.
And if the truth be told, even those of us in the black community have biases
Absolutely.
against our own people. I mean, you know, I was telling somebody earlier today, something has happened to our collective psyche that we see black men as dangerous. You see them as suspicious. We see them as up to no good. I mean, I struggle as the daughter. I mean, I live in a black neighborhood. I hate we have to keep saying that, but I live in a black neighborhood, and I mean, I live between 2 streets that are contrasted in Atlanta. So I'm there. I'm in the community, but even I have those issues when I see certain types of my black brothers. You know, you get, you know, a little tense, and I don't want to feel that way. but I know it happens.
Yeah.
And so the work to get rid of these things is going to require a lot. And we can talk about later what really feeds that, I think, in all of us. But, you know, these biases are deep, very deep.
It is real. I mean, I think one of the challenges for us when we were putting together the film is how do you make it really authentic for people that bring a different lived experience, right? Bias, like you said, isn't you know, no one's got the market cornered on bias. But even when we looked at the reactions of some of the white people in the video, you know, how do you make that not too egregious so that people don't say, well, wait a minute, that's not me, I'm not a flat out racist, right? But the pause in the moments when you see the mother, you know, and the little girl in the car, or you see people in the boutique, it's enough to get people to just stop and to just say, hey, do I do that? And how egregious or how overt is it? But importantly, you got to get people to think, why do I do that?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the real, you know, goal is to get people to be a little bit more introspective, just to pause and to think. And then if we're more aware of what our biases are, then perhaps we can ensure that we're not acting on them in an inappropriate way.
And how did you guys get to the point? I know this may be a question that's taken us back, but how did you guys even get to the point as an organization where you said this is something that we want to make? What all went into that?
Yeah, we've been on a journey for a while. I mean, P&G is the world's largest advertiser, so I think it's a recognition that the images that we put into
P&G?
Procter & Gamble,
Gotcha.
the 5 billion homes around the world, those images impact how communities see themselves. They impact how people see each other as well. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, if that's an ad for Tide, or if that's a special edition like what we've done with the Look or the Talk. But it's really about trying to elevate the consciousness and awareness of bias and spark that conversation, because if we have that conversation, that leads to dialogue, and that dialogue leads to understanding, and hopefully that understanding leads to some positive action. So for us, it's about an ecosystem of constantly keeping it on the agenda. Because it's easy to deny. It's easy to your point, Dr. King, have a difficult conversation about this because it's uncomfortable. This isn't what most people want to spend their dinner time talking about. But it's only when you call it out that you can actually deal with it, and that we can move beyond just conversation into, frankly, into action.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I don't want to try to represent all white women because that'd be weird. But I have to say that I was, you know,
You feel like I feel sometimes carrying the weight of the black community when I walk in certain rooms.
I was sort of nervous to participate in the conversation because, because I feel like there's this, you know, I consider myself in my heart an ally and, you know, of really all people. But then at the same time, you don't want to condescend or act like you know something. I mean, I can't speak to what it's like to be a black man and have somebody look at me in fear. And so what can I contribute to the conversation, and how can I help? And so I think sometimes it's hard to...
Well, let's ask a real question. Have you ever had a response like I've had?
Well, of course, and we've talked about this on the radio show. Like, I don't believe you can be colorblind. Right? You see somebody and you have your lizard brain that makes a judgment. And we all have that. And you know, I'm no way above that. Of course not. But then I think, you know, it is about what you do with that. Do you process that and cross the street, or you know, roll up the window, or do you give yourself a minute and say, wait a second, that's ridiculous reaction. This is another human being, and I'm going to stay on this side of the street. And then not only that, I'm going to make eye contact and nod hello. But that's a conscious choice.
And speaking of that, you know, today is the same day that Emmett Till was killed.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
Allegedly, as we know now, whistling at a white woman. And, you know, you're talking about biases all over. We've been dealing with this a long time, so it's been, 64 years for him. So that's a very good point that you just made. It's like, how do we catch ourselves?
Right.
Because we have to deal with it.
We were talking before dinner about the idea that it would be lovely if/when we get to the point, however many years from now, where we just see people, but we're nowhere near that right now, and we have to acknowledge that we're nowhere near that right now. You know, our instinct is self-protection, and so if we see something that our lizard brain is telling us is dangerous, we have to process that.
Right. Sonny, we got to come at you.
Yeah.
As a poet, an artist, I feel like you go deep on different topics and different things. And,
I'm processing
No pressure.
every line and everything and creating, you know, as we speak. But
I almost don't want to ask you this because it's really a question for the table. I kind of want to know how we got here in our nation.
Yeah.
But speak on that a little bit and just your first kind of thoughts about all of this in general.
So the first word that just comes to mind is enslavement. And quite often we don't want to talk about slavery. We don't want to talk about, you know, this quote unquote peculiar institution. We don't want to. We say, oh, that was then.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about the DNA, the cultural DNA, not just what's coursing through us, but the cultural DNA, what it is that's still kind of moving through us. You know, so this is it's a thing. It's going back to these aspects when we're talking about consciousness, being conscious, being aware, and wanting to do that. It has to be a real want to do that. It has to be a real desire to want to connect with people, and quite often if we're very honest, it's just not a desire for some people to connect. We don't like, and it's tough because we're so traumatized by so many things that's happening, and then now we're in a hypersensitive time.
very.
So it's you almost can't say anything. Because the moment you do say something, you're automatically thrown away.
The knives are coming out.
Everything, the knives, the guns, the
boulders.
sword, the little things that darts and everything else, you know, is coming out. But this is why just words like this: courage, bravery, hope, even hope.
Yeah.
That's something that's you know, that's something that's not a light thing. That's not for cowards. So when we talk about, you know, even in that, it's not like this blind little or this small little, oh man, I hope things get better. It's not coming from a weak space. We want to say this coming from the most courageous space, because we know that when we're hoping for something, it's something that's incomplete. You don't hope for something that you have. So it's about getting to that space where we are wanting to make real, genuine connections with people. So how do we speak heart language? Because here's the other reality. Other reality is what I want to say, because there are different levels, I think, of you know, how we're moving in different dimensions. So then we have to deal with, what power do we really believe we have? Do we really believe that we can make these kinds of connections? Do we make films like this and just say, let's just put it out there and see? No, we're making films like this because we believe that we have the power to kind of penetrate people's minds, people's hearts, so that eventually it's moving to the feet, so that we can start walking this talk and we can start talking this walk, because it's quite often we're doing things and we're not doing things. We're doing things and we're not undoing the things that got us into these positions. So now how do we get there? How do we really talk about a genuine kind of love? With a capital L kind of love. How do we do that when we're moving in so many the microaggressions, our own, you know, we can talk about, you know, then we go to that talk about the inner child and all of these kind of things, and then we look up and it's like, maybe you just need a nap. Maybe all of us need a nap.
A long nap.
A long nap. This is really what it is. We look up and people are angry, people are tired, people are this, people are that. We're dealing with all of these other demons, and then you want me to deal with your demons, and I don't feel like dealing with your demons because I remember what your demons did to my ancestors.
Exactly.
So that's when we have to deal. Now it comes to, well, what do you mean? So the genuine connections, and to go back to what you said, the courageous conversation that has to happen in a space where we're scared. We're scared we're scared of not being accepted. We're scared of not being loved then it goes back to all those connecting those other dots. Like, oh well, mama didn't love me this way, so I'm looking at this mother figure or this father figure, and I'm not even, I'm putting this projection on someone else, and it's like, oh, what if you do me the same way they did me? What if this happens? What if that? We don't. It's so much, and it's so layered, and it's too many layers. And then it goes back to that. Just take the nap again. Go back to sleep and then wake back up. Let's talk about it when you take your nap.
After this,
So then, what was your kind of reaction to the film and all of this that we're talking about now?
I think it's powerful. I think one of the ways that we trivialize white supremacy is when we treat it as if the most extreme forms of it are the only real threats of it. And so I think that what a film like that reminds us is that the reach of the ideology of white supremacy is so far and so deep, right? And we're not up against behavior management here, really, right? We're not trying to just get people. I mean, I think there is something to being conscious of it, but we're up against a much bigger force at the end of the day, right? I mean, we've taken in this centuries-old ideology around the human hierarchy of whiteness at the top, blackness at the bottom, and everybody in between, and it just forms the way we respond to everything in life. And I think that video just does a nice job of kind of drawing out the way that it's not the bad racist people who walk around with tiki torches and then good people who don't do those things. Like, we're all infected by this deep and profound and diabolical ideology.
So why is black skin still a problem?
Well,
I mean, really. I mean, all the work we've done through time, or have we done the work that we really need to do?
Black skin is still a problem, I think, because there are too many advantages for too many people. For I think racism is too profitable.
Yes.
Racism is profitable in more ways than just financial.
Yes.
And so you have a system that thrives on racism. And let's not just talk about racism. I mean, we're talking really about all kinds of identity-based prejudice and discrimination. So we have to talk about intersectionality here. We have to talk about what Kimberly Crenshaw, that term that a lot of people think is too long of a word to use. Intersectionality is not too hard of a word to spit out, so let's all start using it. Intersectionality, okay? We're talking about different forms of oppression, all working in concert with one another, okay? And so when we talk about racism, we also have to talk about sexism, misogyny.
Yes.
We have to talk about discrimination against the disabled. We have to talk about all the different things that are systemically built to make their lives harder. We have to talk about all the different things that are built within the society to marginalize LGBTQ people.
Yes.
All these different things, all these systems working in concert with one another. Okay? And these are things that are inherently profitable, financially and otherwise, to people. And they, as we've seen now, this administration has shown us in very sort of plain ways how it can actually be profitable. But we see it in more subtle ways every day. It's profitable in terms of you maybe getting ahead in line sometimes. It's more profitable to you in terms of you maybe getting preferential treatment in a restaurant.
Absolutely,
It is profitable in so many ways, and that is why the system perpetuates itself.
And it's profitable for me, because we talked about this earlier, for our whole media and entertainment industry. Everything we talk about in our country, they never get touched enough. We point fingers at government, elected officials, parents, talking about education, and media just stands back, and they're like immune to all of this, and yet they contribute to a lot of the divisiveness. I'm not saying all media, because Dana, you have your own show.
I'm about to say hashtag not all media.
I mean, the large media conglomerates, media entertainment conglomerates are like the ones who kind of, light the fire and run away. And then talk like it's all of that.
And it's a problem for people who work within media conglomerates because those of us who are within these big media corporations see it happening, and they're sometimes powerless to stop it. You know, I've worked for different media corporations that have been, you know, their movie comes out and has really problematic images, and I'm over here working for the cable network or the, you know, the publication, and what am I to do about it? And then people are like, well, what are you going to say? Well, what am I supposed to do? Walk into the head of the studio's office and say, you know, and then that's my job? I don't know. The power systems are set up in such a way that it makes it almost impossible for people to be held accountable.
Let's talk about the power systems.
Yeah.
You go.
I was just going to say, I mean, my experience in the media is that I'm an oddity in talk radio because I certainly try to be inclusive, but I'm a liberal female in a very white male conservative industry, and I've had to sort of force my way in, and the reality is I'm not particularly welcome because I want to have these kinds of conversations on my show, and I have these kinds of conversations, and to that end, my show has been canceled, not once but twice. In fact, it ends on Friday for this exact reason. So, yeah, I mean, these conversations are not welcome. I mean, everybody talks about, you know, left-wing media bias on television. Well, on radio, it's the exact opposite. And it's because these conversations are not profitable.
You know, when you talk about a power system, you're feeling the effect of the power system. And I think, to whoever brought it up earlier about ideology, if we take colonialism and ideology and put them together, then what you have is you have ideological colonization, where you colonize people into an ideology, right? But the colony has to function. So the colony, and as soon as you step out of the ideology by which the colony functions, well then, right, you're not welcome. You're not welcome. But the problem with that is that the edges of the colony are always porous. Everyone is related to someone that doesn't fit in the colony, and they care about that person. So then you got to figure out how to have underground conversations with people you care about, so your show doesn't get canceled, right? Or you step toward it and risk the show getting canceled. And I think something we had to face, you brought up, Sam, you brought up being a pastor, we had to face that just as perfect love can cast out fear, so perfect fear can cast out love. And when fear is fomented, well then the natural DNA of our humanness begins to react. And you can step away from a situation and say, oh, what was I afraid of? What was that about? But you are swept up in it before you imagine, and then someone's been damaged, and you may never see them again. You may never meet them again. And it drives us to shame and guilt. And when I can step forward and say, if you would like to know what is white privilege, I am white privilege. And someone says, well, you know, what was your financial situation growing up? What neighborhood you grew up in? That's not the point. White privilege is access based on an acceptable color. And when my kids, when they fill out their college applications, or they fill out their, you know, like a job application, 4 of them never have to once wonder if there will be a negative impact about checking Caucasian. I mean, it's like a second nature. It's like assumed, right? But the one who has to check, right, however it's on the page, black, African American, person of color, that person has to think, well, I wonder where this is going, right? So I think we have to process that there was a ideological colonization, not just a geographic colonization. And we're living out of that ideology, and we're going to have to confront the ideology in different ways to break the patterns.
Damon, what's your role at Procter & Gamble?
I lead our global communications team, but I also am responsible for ensuring through our advocacy work that we're having a lot of these tough conversations, be it about race or sex or gender or sexual orientation.
Speaking on power systems, what bias do you see in kind of the world you're in? Maybe not just Procter & Gamble, but that whole advertising world and system that would even give you the passion to want to fight and do some other things.
I think it's to call it an old boys club would be a little bit of an understatement. But like many industries, it's an industry that is built on who you know, right? If you're a producer, you're going to work with a director that you know. You've got a director of photography that you know, and so a lot of it depends on people who have shared similar interests and backgrounds, and who you've had the opportunity to be in that same space with. I think for us, we need to be deliberate about diversifying that industry, because to your point, Dr. King, if you want to have different images on your TV and in your movies and in your commercials, you can have different people behind the camera, right? So what are the opportunities that we're creating, and how are we being deliberate to say, I need a black director, a gay director, a female director in there making and calling the shots? And there are some systemic things that we can do in terms of bringing more people in the industry, but a lot of it's just about being intentional and declaring that, hey, that business as usual is not okay, right? And so it's a lot of just trying to challenge what is comfortable, and people aren't hiring their friend because they're deliberately excluding anybody else. I've been hired to do a job, I need someone that I know, I trust my friend, you know. But if you only work with your friends, then you're always going to have those same group of people. So a lot of it for us is acknowledging the bias that exists, acknowledging when you Google beautiful women with perfect hair, and when you see, you know, white women with blue eyes and blonde hair, and you don't see black girls with curly natural hair, that's a problem. And that requires a deliberate intervention. And so I think for us, it's about really just acknowledging that and making some of those deliberate interventions.
Let me read something real quick that it may go back to something we've been talking about. But I wanted to share it because this is an issue that you're right, we're going to have to be very intentional about. Because of the psychological aspects. So there's a brain scan that this particular gentleman did a study on that revealed that the amygdala section of the brain that's associated with fear, and also I think and also associated with preparing for, you know, an emergency, responds more when people view a black male face as opposed to a white male face.
Implicit bias.
It is just embedded in us immediately.
Implicit
So
bias.
how do you deal with something that's so embedded?
Can
I mean, what are the steps?
One I would say is this. Like I hear, whoever brought up the colorblind part, inherent in colorblind is that it's going to go bad. Why else would you have to be colorblind? If noticing, I've never said to my wife, hey baby, if it's going to work, I got to be gender blind. You know? So you have to begin to press against the story you've been told and the story you tell yourself. Because I'm, like for instance, I brought up my son. I mean, he's probably the safest man in the parking lot anybody's going to meet. But they don't think that when they see him.
Exactly.
So through the images, through the conversation, we have to recreate the narrative. Like the narrative that black men are sexually dangerous was created by white men that raped black women.
Right.
So if you have rapists creating a narrative about someone else, there's a reason to create that narrative. And it's not just to cast this person in a negative light. It's to protect the profitability of the narrative. So those stories have to be told and shared. As uncomfortable as they are, they've got to be shared and told.
I mean, I would actually recommend that everybody, when they get a chance, go to Birmingham, Alabama, and then go to
Montgomery.
go to Montgomery.
Either one.
I'm sorry, go to Montgomery, Alabama, and they go to the new memorial where you see not just the pillars that, you know, that the Equal Justice Initiative has built, you know, to memorialize all those who were lynched, but look at the reasons that they have posted for why people were lynched, and just the most trivial things in the world. And that's the thing that's, I mean, I get a chill now just thinking about it.
Give us some of those.
Oh my goodness. not just looking at white women, but asking for a cup of water, things like this. I mean, during a break when somebody else is talking, I'll look up some of the pictures and I will tell you. But the point is that I bring that up is to think about like how cavalier people have been with our lives, you know, and how that continues, and to think about how that continues to be perpetuated within the society. And if we can just get to that point where we understand how that is perpetuated within the system, and we have to work on that, I think most urgently. We have to understand that, you know, not just with police violence, but also within our own healthcare system. You know, we have biases within our own healthcare system that are killing black mothers at a higher rate, you know, within our maternity wards than they're killing white women. So we have to understand that these things are active, these things are happening, and we need to work on systemic fixes as much as we work on these sort of individual behaviors.
So are we saying, I just want to ask a question, if I were to sum it up, are you saying that bias is more unintentional than intentional?
No, I think that this is something we have to start attacking from birth. I mean, we need to start working at this I mean, you almost get to the pre-K level, you're almost too late. When these brains are forming, I was speaking with a psychologist. I was in San Francisco recently, and I was speaking with a psychologist. He said, listen, they get these kids, we're really celebrating these pre-K programs. These mayors are really excited about pre-K. Oh, yeah, we're excited about that. He said, they don't realize that pre-K is too late. These brains are forming within the first 5 years. These kids need to be learning between the age 0 and 5. Okay, so
that means in the womb too.
Yes,
because you're picking things up in the womb.
Absolutely.
And you getting these kids pre-K. You know, you getting them 5 years old. That's almost too late sometimes. So not only you need to be teaching them maybe math and science and English on all these kind of basic learning skills, but we need to be teaching them about this kind of cultural fluency.
Let me ask that question a different way. Are you guys saying that people are intentionally choosing to be biased, or are you saying they just float into it?
I think honestly, this society, this America that we have built, this wonderful experiment that we all treasure and we think and we've been taught to think is so perfect, is an extraordinarily flawed place. And we drop kids into it thinking that they're going to be just fine if we just raise them and then they just grow up in it. And then we're surprised when they get to be a certain age. And then wait a minute, wait there. I don't understand why Junior is going off to join the white supremacist group. Oh, I don't understand why Junior is going off and joining the gang. I don't understand why things are going awry. It's because they're growing up in a country that is fundamentally flawed from the jump. And we're teaching them that this country is perfect and wonderful and feeding them these myths about America when we should be teaching them that America has really got a lot of work to do and we should be working on America. And that's, to me, if we really actually patriots, we actually really love this country, we'd be trying to fix it.
And that's where unconscious bias in some regards has become an excuse, right? Yes, unconscious bias is very real. We need to address it. But now that we're all conscious, like, what are you going to go do? Right? And unconscious bias and the systemic bias that impacts criminal justice, education, healthcare, all of those. So I think sometimes we say, is it this or is it that? In reality, it's all of it, right? And we've got to continue to make sure that as we're doing these things individually, we got to look at our institutions and our corporations and our radio stations and our books that we read, and we've got to become more educated consumers of the information that we're getting from every regard.
I don't want us to miss something that you said, Jamil, and I'm not trying to advertise, but it's been important to me since I went to the opening. The museum in Montgomery, which, I mean, it was just so perfect to be built in a place where was where the first was the first shot of the Confederacy, or the first home of the Confederacy. As well as the birthplace of the movement that my father led, the Civil Rights Movement. The museum and the memorial there, to me, that is a very good starting place for corporations, for churches, for schools to take a trip. To me, that particular museum, I think it's called the Legacy Museum, from enslavement to mass incarceration, that Brian Stevenson, in his work through the Equal Justice Initiative, founded and created in a very small space. It was formerly a slave warehouse that he built it in. And it's a very small space, but it's very powerful in that small space that really helps us to understand the origins of white supremacy and how it continues to perpetuate itself in our criminal justice system. And that is a place where you have to really confront this America that you're talking about.
Yes, indeed.
And then going over to the memorial that's outdoors that you're talking about. I mean, you can't miss it. I mean, to me, it's one of, I would say it is next to the Holocaust. I appreciate the Museum of African American History and Culture. But this one makes the connection.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like the Holocaust. When you come out of the Holocaust Museum, you're kind of messed up. I don't know if you all have been, but it's like...
Real messed up.
It's the same thing going to this one. So please, just for the sake of those people who are viewing, please get there, because it's...
Yeah, and on that note, Reverend, I mean, some of the reasons. I've looked up. So one was Matt Brown was lynched in Fulton County, Georgia, in 1936 for kissing a white woman on the hand. Albert Williams was lynched in Brownsville, Tennessee, in 1940 for working to register black voters as part of the local NAACP.
There was something in there about a dog too.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is one of them just lynched for voting. Period. Oliver Moore lynched for frightening a white girl.
And
this is the kind of stuff.
These are supposed.
These are people who
These
died.
are not even These are not even things that they know existed. That they know happened.
Henry Patterson was lynched in Florida for asking a white woman for a drink of water. This is
wow. Wow.
To make it kinesthetic, several of our Be the Bridge groups at our church, they take a trip together. And they go to Montgomery, and they go through it together, right? And they're standing right next to each other, sharing the experience.
Not to shift us too much to solutions,
No, please.
but Pastor Daniel, I want to ask you a question. Tell us about your church. What are the demographics? Where is it at? What's the member size?
It's called River City Community Church. It's a 17-year-old church in the city of Chicago. You probably know Chicago's kind of got a north side, a south side, a west side. So each has a very kind of distinct personality. So we're on the west side of the city. We're on Grand Avenue, which Chicago Tribune called the most significant dividing line between the black and brown community in the city of Chicago. Very poor neighborhood and violent, kind of all the stuff that comes with that. So we're located there. I have a long-term relationship with kind of the partner, grammar school there, so that's kind of why we found our building, so it would be within walking distance of that school. And so kind of a weird mixed match of it's kind of a community development kind of church that's 6-block radius in terms of everything that it does, and very much is intentionally located at the intersection of race and poverty. But then you get a diverse group from outside the neighborhood that's kind of interested in that kind of ministry and commutes in to be part of the church and wants to learn about the history of race, wants to learn about ways they can be participating in both.
Is it a predominantly white church or kind of diverse? And
it's race stuff gets shared. What the white folks at our church would say is the most diverse place they've ever been. Right? The black folks at our church would say it's a white church. Right? There you go. So the body's about half white, and then it's mixed. Probably black is the next biggest group, and then Latinx and Asian American mixed race folks. So it's pretty substantial presence from everybody.
So I want to ask the three of you all a question. Have you always been where you are now in your thinking? Was there ever a time that this issue around bias and even black people was a real serious problem and challenge for you? And if so, how did you shift? What contributed to your shift?
So I think my experience might be different. I guess we'll see. But I grew up in Philadelphia in a sort of lower middle class neighborhood. It happened to be predominantly Catholic, and so I was actually a minority because I was raised Jewish, and there was a lot of bias against 2 or 3 Jewish kids in the area. There were very few people of color. There were like a handful of black kids in my school, like 1 Asian kid. I mean, it was a really white neighborhood. Like westish. I'm really bad with direction.
No, I was just thinking what part of Philly.
Yeah, but I remember feeling like I wanted to be friends with the black kids because I felt like I was picked on for being Jewish, and I think I carried that through my upbringing, and when I got into college and after college and started interacting with more people of color, I remember being surprised in my early 20s when a coworker, a teammate of mine, who was a computer programmer, a young black man, told me that when he walks down the street, women will cross to the other side. And I was like, I mean, it was just so foreign to me. That was an experience that black men were having because I just hadn't been exposed to it.
Wow.
And so I remember feeling, and also that was when I first learned that there were, like, I really didn't know that there were Muslim blacks that didn't like Jews. I just thought we were kinship because we were all, like we were all sort of, there was prejudice against all of us, and so I thought we were all on the same page, and then I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm missing a lot of the story here, and educated myself after that. And I think my struggle from the 20s to the whatever I am now is how to be, is how to be helpful and move the conversation. And I don't want to go too far off the question, but I do want to say that the video, the movie, I think the thing that struck me the most was the little girl in the car and her mother, and how the little girl wasn't biased. It was a mother.
Right.
And I guess the only thing I ever saw as a way that I could genuinely contribute, at least before I had a radio show, was by trying to teach my kid to see people as people.
Right.
But beyond that, when we get to the conversation about action, I never really knew how else to be helpful. So I think that's what my progress has been.
That's strong.
Don or Daniel?
Daniel, yeah. How'd you get there? That's what I wanted to know, where you were now, and how you arrived at this sense of awakening.
Or have you always been, as they say, woke?
Right.
I'm embarrassed by the fact that I had so many chances to kind of see more clearly growing up, and I think my friend Julian DeShazier, pastor on the South Side, he defines privilege simply as the ability to walk away. I don't think that's the full dimension, but I think it's a really interesting play. And at that level, my life was filled with privilege because I had access to the opportunity to see these things, and I continue to choose to walk away. So, kind of like you're saying, you feel yours is distinct. I feel like mine is distinct too. When I hear other people's story, for me, it really was I'm a pastor, right? So I'm drawn to faith, and for me, it was a theological kind of thing. I was really meditating on the Apostle Paul. I think one of the ways he thinks about the Christian life is very much this kind of battle between good and evil. And he talks in Ephesians 6, he says, we battle not ultimately against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness. And I'm simplifying my story a little bit, but through a series of kind of conversations and studies and sitting under other mentors, I came to realize that white supremacy is not just a social problem. That I see it as the primary spiritual battle in our day and age. Like if Jesus is saying he's coming to bring his kingdom here on earth, I think white supremacy and the devil ultimately, I think white supremacy is the primary tool the devil uses to advance darkness in this world. And I think it's the number one form of opposition to Christ and his kingdom. And unfortunately, the white church oftentimes is on the wrong side of that battle. I had to kind of make sense of that too. So it was a period in my 20s of kind of coming to see that as kind of the fundamental spiritual battle happening. And it just, for me, became very simple. If I love Jesus, which I do, and if I want to follow him, which I do, confronting white supremacy was no longer an option. It wasn't some kind of a social project that I needed to be part of. It was
Did you have any friends that
left?
Yes.
I had to find new friends after that.
That one got you.
Wow. Yeah.
Was your faith comforting for you to do that? Because I think it goes back to what you were saying, and I'm trying to remember exactly how you said it, but this whole fear element, and people don't like to be disliked or not approved or accepted.
Yeah.
So you think your faith just kind of drove you much more strongly than
my
that fear?
chronicle of this, my opening chapter is called "The Day I Discovered My World Was White," and I never had thought of my world as being all white. But when you start asking these questions, you realize all your mentors, all the people guiding, are white and are not thinking about this for the most part. And so I wouldn't want to minimize the pain that has happened in terms of the alienation of that. Although, of course, I don't want to compare it to anything of what most people face on a daily basis. But yeah, I did kind of have to find new mentors, new family, new friends, who could kind of walk me. Because another mistake I made is thinking that the light bulb turning on was the end of the journey. And really, that's just the beginning of the journey, right? I mean, there are so many stages of dealing with the way white supremacy has impacted me, my understanding of how white supremacy has impacted the world. There were so many stages that folks need to walk me through. My spiritual mother, Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil. There's just a lot of folks like that who have kind of had to hold my hand as I'm stumbling into a deeper understanding of white supremacy and helping me kind of stay grounded in my faith. And I needed a whole new kind of group of
So would you say you had to give up something to gain something?
I often think of I want to avoid overgeneralizations, but so much of the white church feels like the rich young ruler to me, where they, when the rich young ruler comes to Jesus, for those who don't know the story, when he comes to Jesus, he says, "I've been keeping all the commandments since I was a boy." What you realize is he's only keeping some of the commandments, right? But his sense of self-righteousness came from keeping the commandments he thought were important. And Jesus says, Jesus extends an invitation that's unique. He actually says, you can come all the way in. You can be part of my disciples. You can be all the way in the inner circle. You just have to give all your money away to Justice for the Poor and come with me. Right? And then the young man wasn't trying to trap Jesus. He wasn't trying to be difficult, but his commitment to possessions was too strong, and he walked away sad. Right? And so it's a yes and a no. Yes, he would have had to walk away from something real, but he would have gotten something so much more. Right? So it's like I don't want to overstate I think we're always most alive when we're with Jesus. And so, do we walk away? Is it real to walk away from comfort and privilege and money and people's opinions? Yes. Does it compare to walking with Jesus? To me, no. So to me, there's no question in it. But I think a lot of people get caught in that kind of cross section of like money on one side and Jesus on the other, or privilege and power on one side, Jesus on the other.
Like I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and Portland prides itself in diversity and weirdness. Right? I mean, like Grand Slam home run, but it also has an incredible racist history, and I grew up not knowing that. Okay, my dad was water and sewer line construction, so I asked my parents one time. I asked them, "Were you like race conscious?" Because we did have people of color in our home for a meal. But it didn't register, so I'm looking back. I mean, I'm talking, my mom's going to be 83 in a few months. I'm having these conversations right now. What was that about? And my mom was very candid. She said, we weren't, she didn't say woke, but that's what she meant. We weren't woke. We didn't know what was going on. We had no agenda. We just, there's the industry we're in, just looking for friends. So I think that there was a sense in which they were doing something that they didn't know to do, didn't plan to do, and she takes no righteous halo over because none of that was involved in why it was actually happening. But the fact that it was happening, to your point about how little you are, it had to have influenced us some, okay? Very much to Daniel's point, as a white person, you can just up and walk away, right? So when Philando Castile was murdered, you think about this. So we're in a conversation with my son, and what I realize is that he cannot walk away from that. See, he can't unzip his black skin and walk out of that situation. But you get what I'm saying? I can in that way. And so to be candid, God put a lot of people in my life, and then we came here. And I met one of the shepherds of our church, Fernando, and his wife, Donna. And she gave me an article back in '98. Have you read this article about race? She said, "What'd you think of that?" I said, I thought it was great. She said, it's terrible. I said, it is? She said, yes. I said, what's wrong with it? She said, now that you know that a person of color thinks it's terrible, you go back and read it and you figure it out. And in doing so, right, what it said to me was, why do I only have one set of eyes?
Yeah.
And the world happened.
Yeah.
So to your point, I would say that the big shift came when I began to be engaged with people where I didn't want to know them less to love them more.
Yeah.
I wanted to fully know and fully love. And that's where the pain comes in, because you don't just begin to realize that the country's got problems. I begin to realize I got problems.
Yeah.
I'm doing this to people.
Yeah.
And now where does it go from there? So that would be the big shift for me.
So I have to ask
Please,
this question.
please,
I have to, because I know, you've had the privilege of going around in some of the white evangelical
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah.
I've had a little bit of that. I'm struggling real bad as a minister, as a daughter of Dr. King, with my brothers and sisters in the white evangelical church.
Yes.
Some people that are listening may not even care if they're reached, but I do.
You bet.
You're talking about solutions. What's the solution to moving the needle there? Because they remind me, and I'm not saying every person who's a part of the white evangelical church, so let me make that clear, because we never want to do broad strokes.
Right.
But a good percentage who remind me of the same individuals that my father wrote to, letter from the Birmingham jail. And, they're those folks today who are helping to perpetuate because the turn-away, or because they, some will applaud some of what's happening
That's right.
right now, the divisiveness,
Yeah.
divisive language
Yeah.
that comes from the White House. So, what do we do?
I think
Because that's a world that you're in. Dana, I don't know. You're so you don't have to deal with that. What can we as black people do, or as Dick Gregory said, this ain't about us. I don't know if y'all saw that. Did you see that? When Trump got elected, he said, this ain't about y'all. I'm talking about black people. But something has to happen, because I cannot understand for the life of me how people can be so complicit.
Yeah. The work that Ibram Kendi's doing is important.
Yes.
His stamp from the beginning, followed up by How to Be an Anti-Racist. This is important work because he links it to the work of faith. And one of the things he shares in this book he just published is, and I believe this with all my heart, it is not your job to fix this white boy.
No, not at all.
It isn't.
No.
And it isn't your job, nor is it your job to fix this Christian man. It's not your job. If I want to treat you right, then that's got to be something that starts right inside here.
Yeah.
But having conversations like this allows us to open the door, which is why I think Latasha's work is so important. Is you got, like in our church, you got tons of people that are in the Be the Bridge groups where for 9 months they're at a table like this with the same group of people, walking through a curriculum of lament and confession and my goodness, right? So you get to the end of that, you're different.
But
And
how
then
do
the
you
church
take
is
that difference and deal with these systems and these structures? Because that's the real issue.
Because so it changed our leadership.
A lot of people will get past that whole, bias with another black person.
Yes.
But then we
That's
still
right.
have these racial structures and systems that we are not working on collectively.
That's right.
You
So,
know,
and the church has got to own
and black
itself in
people
that.
are getting tired, beyond angry,
That's right.
and so
And should be.
Yeah.
and should be.
But I hope it turns into righteous
agree.
indignation, not dangerous anger.
I mean, I hear you that it's not anybody else's job to fix the white supremacist or the, you know, evangelical who's seeing things differently than you do or you do. But at the same time, and I think there probably is a certain percentage of the population that whose minds will never be changed. But I think what's frustrating, and I think you were saying this, is that there's a whole lot of people who aren't that extreme, who are complicit, who are just accepting a Trump or a march or whatever it is, and they're saying, I don't care because I got my tax cut, or I don't care because, you know, I got my Supreme Court to do what I wanted them to do. And so if there's racism in the mix or misogyny in the mix or anti-Semitism or whatever else, whatever, not my problem. And I do feel that it is all of our responsibilities to change those minds.
Yes. What I meant was, and I agree with you, what I meant was, it is not on a person of color to try to figure out how to get me to finally think that I should care. That, I own that. Right? And so what Kendi points out is, someone might in the black community even say to someone else in the black community, well, now if you do this and you dress differently and you walk differently, then everyone would like you better. That is nuts. And it's not the case. Right?
Right, like blame the hoodie.
Right. But I think to what Daniel said, I think there does come to the point of the rich young ruler where we do have to accept that we're making value judgments. And we're judging certain things in our privilege that are worth more to us than making this change.
So real quick, because I know our time is kind of winding up, and I want to thank you all for this conversation. There's obviously a lot of work we need to do. And what can we collectively kind of agree that we as individuals need to do? If it's this, yes. But I just feel like it's something else out of this. And when I say this, these conversations, what is it that we can do to encourage people, you know, who are listening to get in this process of moving the needle? Not just the needle, but we need some serious transformation.
Well, Dr. King, I think there's one other cue we can take from Ibram and his work is that we have to make all of our work anti-racist work. We have to understand that everything that we do has to be anti-racist. We can't simply think that, okay, well, what I'm doing is not consciously racist, so that's okay. Well, if you were not working actively to deconstruct racism, to end this this racist project, so to speak, then you are almost de facto contributing to it. And we need to help people understand that as a reality. And so if we all can kind of work within that construct, I think we're going to get a lot further, a lot faster.
So we all need to be woke, participating, and conscious on a daily basis.
On a daily basis.
And pushing through where it's uncomfortable.
And pushing where it's uncomfortable.
Because we get to that point.
Too.
We get to that point when we have these conversations, and my boss calls it the puckering up. It's like, oof, do I really want to go there, right? Because it's easier just not to have the conversation. It's easier to move on, and it's at that point when you get that little feeling inside that you've got to push yourself to understand why you're feeling it. Push the people around you, because if you can't talk about it, you're not going to get to solutions. But we've got to all come out of our comfort zone, no matter where you're approaching this issue.
And we're so compartmentalized. We put our spirits here. We go to work. We leave our hearts at home. We walk up the street. We leave our eyes somewhere else. We're not connecting with anybody. We're not connecting with anybody. We always say that when a woman is pregnant, they don't check for the brain beat. They don't check for the liver beat. They check for the heartbeat. So it's how are we connecting with people's hearts? And it's quite often we're not doing that because it's scary work. That's where that feeling comes in. But if you were in the gym and the trainer is on you,
push.
You got one more. You got one more. You can do it. You can do it. And you're doing it. But when it comes down to that hard work, when it comes down to that soul busting, spirit moving kind of work, it's like, oh, no, no, no. That's where we become cowards.
Yeah.
So how do we take the same kind of mental, attitude and force that we can bring to the gym, that we can bring to the swimming pool? How do we bring that to actually working and moving and speaking and listening and hearing and seeing from the heart?
And so I'm going to conclude with that by saying it's the heart work that we have to do at tables like this with courageous conversations, because when we're at tables like this, it's hard to escape.
Yeah.
You have to bring the eyes, the hands, especially when it's small like this, the heart and all to it, because it's we talk about policy change, but we have to have heart change. And I know my father was working on both in his lifetime. It's something I'm committed to, and we're committed to at the King Center when we train people in our Nonviolence 365. And Damon, I just want to thank you again, PMG, for this opportunity, and encourage all of you who've been listening to have your own conversations and dinners and make it very courageous, because we can't keep this at the surface. This is deep dive stuff, because we got a lot of divides in this nation, and now is our time because it's an urgent moment. I mean, with the election coming up next year, things are going to get even more polarized, because we know how elections are. But we as a people can help to ensure that we don't come apart next year. And you can be having dinners next year and consistently with the same group, as you said, like be the bridge. So you be the bridge. Let us all be the bridge to move this nation forward, to be the nation that we wrote on that paper. As Daddy said, be true to what you wrote on the paper.
That's good.
That we're all created equal and have these inalienable rights. So thank you for joining us on tonight, and thank you all for being my guests.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll do this again.
I certainly hope so. All right.
Dr. King's dream of the beloved community. Join the King Center and our partner, Civic Dinners, to learn how to host your own beloved community talk in your own communities. To learn more, visit us on the web at belovedcommunitytalks.org.